It was supposed to be an ordinary flight. Boarding passes scanned, luggage stowed, passengers settling into their seats. But in the hushed luxury of first class, one woman's quiet defiance turned a simple journey into a global spectacle. Naomi Ellis Carter sat in seat 1A, ticket paid in full, loyalty earned through decades of travel. Yet she was told she didn't belong, told to move back, told the system didn't see her. Cameras rose, whispers spread, and in that moment, the world had a choice. Would she be dismissed, or would she redefine the rules? What kind of passenger refuses to bend when security arrives? What kind of woman calmly pulls out documents that can topple an entire airline? And why did her silence shake the system more than shouting ever could? This isn't just a story about a seat. It's a story about dignity, power, and what happens when one woman refuses to move. Before we dive into this journey, let me ask you, where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be remembered, retold, and never ignored. The boarding gate was alive with noise, the kind that fills an airport before a red-eye flight. Conversations rose and fell like overlapping waves. The metallic ding of scanners cut through the air, followed by the shuffle of shoes across polished floors. A toddler clutched a stuffed rabbit, crying quietly against her mother's shoulder. A businessman typed furiously into his phone with 2 thumbs, his carry-on bag propped against his leg. The monitors above the gate glowed with departure times, the promise of destinations. And in the middle of it all stood Naomi Ellis Carter. At 52, Naomi carried herself with the composure of someone who had lived enough years to recognize when she was being watched and judged. Her posture was upright, her chin held with a quiet strength. She wasn't dressed to impress anyone, a navy cardigan draped over a white blouse, gray slacks, and comfortable flats. No flashy jewelry, no designer logos plastered across her body. Just a small leather satchel slung across her shoulder. The kind of bag that looked worn but cared for. When the gate agent called boarding for first class, Naomi stepped forward, boarding pass in hand. She didn't hurry. She didn't hesitate. Every step was deliberate, measured, as though she understood that stepping into that line would be the first act of a play no one had rehearsed. The scanner beeped when her pass was swiped. But instead of the green check that cleared other passengers, a red line flashed across the screen. The agent, a young man with nervous eyes, frowned and tapped the monitor. Then, in a voice louder than necessary, he said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, this seat isn't for you." The words sliced through the hum of the gate. Conversation stalled. Even the child stopped crying. Naomi's lips parted slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition. She had heard that sentence before, though not always in those exact words. At restaurants where she had been told, that section's reserved. In meetings where she was asked, "Are you sure you're in the right room?" And now, here at a gate in Atlanta's crowded terminal, where the glowing screen confirmed what she had paid for. First class, seat 1A, yet the agent's tone told her otherwise. Behind the counter, the list of passengers glowed in neat rows. Just above the empty line for seat 1A, the screen blinked as if waiting to be filled. Naomi spoke softly, evenly. "My boarding pass says 1A. She handed it back, steady as stone. The agent hesitated. "Our system shows you're in economy." Economy, as though the word itself carried the weight of her place in the world. Naomi tilted her head, studying him with calm patience. Check again. Other passengers were already walking down the jet bridge, the wide leather seats of first class waiting just steps away. She could see them from where she stood, wide armchairs, chilled champagne, a quiet world where no one questioned your worth. And yet she was being held in place, treated as if she were trying to sneak past a velvet rope she hadn't paid for. The agent's voice sharpened slightly. "Ma'am, This section is for premium passengers only." A ripple of whispers spread across the waiting area. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others leaned forward, curious. A few raised their phones, holding them low but angled toward Naomi. Screens lit up like small, watchful eyes. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She simply lifted her chin. The corner of her mouth curved, not a smile of amusement, not nervousness, but something unreadable. She let the silence stretch until it felt like every ear in the gate was waiting for her to break it. Then she spoke one sentence, her voice clear and unshaken. "By the time this plane lands, this airline won't look the same." The agent blinked, flustered. He looked back at the screen, then at Naomi, then at the growing cluster of passengers who had paused just beyond the boarding door to watch. Somewhere behind Naomi, a man in a suit muttered, "Probably a system glitch." Another chuckled under his breath, as if the whole thing were inevitable. Naomi didn't respond to them. Her gaze was fixed forward, steady, unyielding. She wasn't here to convince strangers. She wasn't here to argue her way into comfort. She was here to claim what she had already earned. Her boarding pass rested lightly between her fingers, its edges soft from being held too tightly. The satchel strap pressed across her shoulder, inside. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. The gate agent cleared his throat, lowered his voice this time. "Ma'am, please step aside so we can continue boarding." Naomi's eyes swept across the room. Every face she passed carried a question. Was she out of place? Was she stubborn? Was she dangerous? But there were other expressions too. Curiosity, hesitation, the flicker of something like admiration. People were watching, phones were recording, but no one was stepping forward. Not yet. She turned her gaze back to the gate agent and spoke again, her tone calm enough to feel like a verdict. "This pass says 1A, paid in full." He shifted on his feet, caught between the glowing screen that said economy and the woman before him who refused to be dismissed. He didn't know what to do with the silence that followed, so he let it hang there, brittle as glass. Naomi didn't move. She didn't need to. The weight of her stillness spoke louder than protest. Behind her, a child asked loudly, "Why won't they let her on?" The mother hushed him quickly, but the question lingered in the air, echoing what half the gate was already thinking. The boarding door remained open. First-class seats still waited. The airline's promise of quiet luxury gleamed just beyond reach. But the space between Naomi and that jet bridge had turned into something else entirely, not just a threshold between classes, but a stage where the meaning of dignity itself would be tested. Naomi knew it, and though the eyes of strangers pressed against her, she remained still, steady as the ground beneath them. This wasn't just about a seat. It never was. It was about whether she would be allowed to exist in that space without being told she didn't belong. And Naomi Ellis Carter had already decided she would not move. The air inside the jet bridge was cooler than the gate, the kind of recycled chill that carried the faint smell of jet fuel. Naomi Ellis Carter stepped forward, the strap of her leather satchel digging gently into her shoulder. Behind her, other passengers streamed in, chatting casually, some balancing coffee cups, others tugging roller bags over the ridged carpet. Naomi's boarding pass was still warm in her hand, her eyes fixed on the rows just ahead, where the first-class cabin waited. She knew what that seat looked like: wide armrest, folded blanket, the promise of privacy. Seat 1A was supposed to be hers. She had booked it weeks in advance, paid for it without hesitation. She entered the cabin, and the difference was immediate. The lighting was softer, the air calmer. Seats were already filling. A young woman flipped through a glossy magazine. A man sipped sparkling water poured into real glass. There was laughter, the clink of ice, It was a small world carved apart from the cramped rows behind the curtain. Naomi stepped into the first row, set her satchel gently beneath the seat, and lowered herself into 1A. She exhaled slowly, adjusting her cardigan against her shoulders. For a moment, she allowed herself the smallest relief. She had made it here, but the peace lasted only seconds. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice carried the clipped tone of practiced authority. Naomi looked up. Standing in the aisle was a flight attendant in a fitted navy uniform, her blonde hair swept into a tight bun. The name tag pinned neatly to her chest read, Rebecca Miles. Her jaw was tight, her smile thin. "This seat isn't for you," Rebecca said. "Around them." The low murmur of first class quieted. A man 2 rows back set down his glass, angling his head to watch. Another passenger adjusted his phone on his knee. The camera lens pointed just slightly higher than before. Naomi kept her hands folded in her lap. Her voice was steady. "My boarding pass says 1A. Rebecca extended her hand. "Let me see it." Naomi placed the pass carefully in her palm. Rebecca glanced at it, no more than a flick of her eyes, before handing it back. "Our records don't show your name here. You'll need to move to your assigned seat and coach." "Coach," the word landed like a slap. Naomi held her gaze. "I'll stay here until you verify it properly." A soft laugh drifted from behind. Mark Stevens, the businessman Naomi had overheard at the gate, leaned forward in 2A, his tie hung loose around his neck. "Probably a mistake in the booking system," he muttered, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Someone else snorted quietly. The sound was sharp, dismissive, as if the outcome had already been decided. Naomi didn't react. She didn't need to. Her silence was sharper than protest. Rebecca shifted her stance, blocking the aisle with one arm. "Ma'am, the system shows economy. Unless you'd like to be removed before departure, please take your assigned seat." Naomi inhaled once, then released it. "That is not correct." Another attendant appeared behind Rebecca, younger, her hair tucked loosely into her cap. Sophie Grant. Her badge read. She leaned in with a voice tinged with mockery. "Some people see empty seats and think they can upgrade themselves. Happens all the time." The words were casual, but the tone was sharp enough to slice. Naomi's satchel rested beneath the seat, its leather edges worn smooth from years of use. She reached into it slowly, deliberately. Passengers leaned in, curious. From within, she pulled out a platinum-colored card, edges gleaming beneath the cabin lights. She placed it gently on the tray table. 22 years of loyal flights, Naomi said softly. Diamond Elite. Rebecca barely glanced at it. You can order those online these days. Doesn't prove a thing. The condescension lingered in the air like smoke. Naomi's shoulders remained square. Check your system again, or call your supervisor. Sophie's lips curved into a smirk. Security will settle this faster. The murmurs spread through the rows. A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine, watching openly now. Another passenger tilted her phone up, recording from chest level. Naomi caught the reflection of a third phone in the cabin window. 3 cameras. Maybe more. Rebecca tapped her tablet, her fingers moving fast. Her frown deepened. According to this, you purchased economy. Please cooperate. Naomi folded her boarding pass carefully, set it beside the platinum card, and leaned back against the headrest. Her voice was calm, each word deliberate. I am not moving from this seat. From 2A. Mark Stevens chuckled again, shaking his head. Lady, just save yourself the trouble. It's not worth it. Before Naomi could reply, another voice rose from behind. It was firm, female, steady. But she showed you her ticket. Why aren't you checking it properly? Heads turned. Angela Brooks, the mother with the little boy, was leaning forward from row 3. Her son clutched the stuffed rabbit against his chest, wide-eyed. Angela's voice carried the kind of conviction that made silence heavier. Rebecca flushed. Her authority bristled. "Please do not interfere," she said sharply. "This passenger clearly doesn't belong in first class." Naomi's jaw tightened just enough to be noticed. She turned her gaze to the window. Beyond the glass, the jet bridge stood quiet. Workers in neon vests moved carts of luggage across the tarmac. The world outside continued without notice, but inside the cabin, a storm was building. The whispers grew. Subtle smirks flashed. Naomi could feel the weight of strangers assuming she was out of place. It was a shape she recognized, one she had lived with her entire life. Prejudice always disguised itself as procedure. Her phone buzzed once inside the satchel. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Reluctantly, she pulled it out. For an instant, the glow lit her face. A message appeared on the lock screen. Short, but urgent. Board meeting moved to conference room A. Emergency session. Naomi tilted the phone slightly, enough to read, then tapped it dark before anyone else could see. But from 3B, Lila Torres, the college student, caught a glimpse. She frowned, whispering into the mic of her phone, live streaming under her breath. What kind of passenger gets notified about a board meeting? Rebecca's voice sharpened. "Ma'am, you need to gather your belongings and move to economy immediately." Naomi's fingers brushed the edge of her boarding pass. She lifted it once more, holding it steady in the air so that every phone recording could see. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the silence. "Seat 1A, first class, paid in full, and I will not be moved." The cabin froze. The hum of the engines outside was the only sound. Passengers stared, phones glowing. The attendants bristled with authority they weren't sure they still had. Naomi Ellis Carter sat as if carved from stone, her documents displayed neatly before her. She did not fidget. She did not plead. She simply existed there, unmovable, like the quiet center of a gathering storm. And in that moment, the question shifted from whether she belonged in seat 1A to something far more unsettling. Who exactly was Naomi Ellis Carter? The cabin had shifted. You could feel it in the air, in the way conversations thinned to whispers, in the way bodies leaned forward without meaning to. Naomi Ellis Carter sat in 1A, her boarding pass and Diamond Elite card displayed neatly on the tray table. She had made no scene, no outburst, and yet the quiet around her felt heavier than shouting. Phones glowed like lanterns in the dimmed cabin light. Some passengers tilted them discreetly, pretending to scroll, but their cameras were angled toward her. Others didn't bother hiding it anymore. Screens were raised high enough to catch her posture, her stillness, the sharp tension etched into the moment. A man across the aisle coughed, shifting in his seat. The sound seemed exaggerated, like a small protest against the silence. From 3B, Lila Torres whispered into her phone, her voice low but clear enough to carry, "Okay, everyone watching. Here's the update. The lady in 1A is refusing to move. The staff says she doesn't belong there, but she's sitting so calm, like she knows something. It's kind of scary, actually." On her live stream, the feed scrolled with comments. She forged it. "She's rich. She's about to sue. Stay calm. Queen." Thousands of eyes outside the plane were now part of the scene inside. Naomi didn't look at Lila, didn't look at the screens. Her eyes stayed on the oval window. Outside, ground crew in neon vests moved carts of luggage beneath the floodlights. She wondered if they felt freer than she did at that moment. Her phone buzzed again, muffled by the satchel beneath her seat. She ignored it. Then it buzzed once more. She tilted it, just enough for her eyes. Another message. Short, almost cryptic. Board is waiting. Don't delay. Naomi's lips tightened. She placed the phone face down, her decision made in silence. The passengers nearest her exchanged glances. They had seen the glow, the urgency, and curiosity rippled through them. In 4A, a businessman squinted at her wrist, eyes narrowing at the watch she wore. Not just expensive, rare. The kind of timepiece only a handful in the world could afford. He muttered under his breath, "That can't be a knockoff." So, who is she? Rebecca Miles, the lead attendant, folded her arms. She was rattled, though she tried to hide it. She had dealt with angry passengers before anger was easy. Anger could be dismissed as disruptive, unruly. But Naomi's calm, her polite refusal, unsettled her in a way that raised voices never could. "Ma'am," Rebecca said louder, making sure the entire cabin could hear. "Your refusal is causing a delay. We cannot take off until this is resolved." Naomi turned her head slowly. Her voice was even, deliberate, each word pronounced as if it were being recorded, which it was. "I am not the one causing the delay." A ripple of murmurs spread again, softer this time, but unmistakable. Some smirked in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to take a side. The glow of phones tilted higher, catching every syllable. Naomi reached into her satchel, not for papers this time, but for a small, leather-bound notebook. She opened it across her lap and began to write. Names, timestamps, short lines of dialogue, word for word, each stroke of her pen deliberate, like a judge entering evidence into record. Sophie Grant, the younger attendant, scoffed. Oh, now she's taking notes. For what a diary entry, Naomi didn't respond. The pen continued to move, steady and precise. The passengers leaned closer, whispering. She's preparing for something. One murmured, "You don't act like that unless you know you're untouchable." Mark Stevens, the businessman in 2A, who had earlier advised her to save herself the trouble, now leaned back uneasily. He whispered to the man beside him, "Why is she so sure of herself from the galley?" Another attendant whispered too loudly, her voice carrying into the cabin, "Security will have her off the plane in minutes." But the doubt in her tone betrayed her. Naomi closed the notebook with a soft snap, slid it back into the satchel, and clasped her hands together in her lap. She looked neither angry nor afraid. She looked like someone waiting not for defeat, but for revelation. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she answered. She angled her face away from the cameras, her voice low, but fragments escaped. "Yes, still here. No, don't start without me. I'll resolve this personally." Passengers nearest her exchanged glances. The words settled like sparks in dry grass. "Start what resolve?" What Lila leaned closer to her phone, whispering into her mic. "You guys heard that? Right," she said. "Don't start without me." Like she's supposed to be at some meeting. Who is this woman? The air grew thick. Strangers theorized in hushed tones. She's a lawyer. No, a politician. She's connected somehow. I can feel it. Rebecca's authority was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. Her voice rose again, louder, more commanding. "Ma'am, last warning. Move to coach or we'll escort you out." Naomi tilted her chin slightly, her gaze unwavering. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. In the pause that followed, the cabin answered for her through the cameras raised higher, through the comments flooding the streams, through the whispers that had stopped being doubt and started sounding like belief. A woman near the back called out, her voice clear. "Why don't you just scan her boarding pass again? Isn't that the simplest solution?" Rebecca froze, caught between arrogance and logic. Her fingers fumbled against the tablet, tapping the screen. Her colleague Sophie leaned close, whispering, "Something's off. Why won't the system clear her seat?" Naomi's phone lit up once more. Another notification pulsed across the glass. Board meeting rescheduled. Emergency session begins now. She locked the screen before anyone else could see it, but not fast enough. Angela Brooks, the mother in row 3, caught the words and whispered to herself, almost too quietly to hear. Board meeting. What kind of passenger gets texts like that? A new silence fell, heavier than before. It wasn't resignation anymore. It was curiosity, suspicion, anticipation. Naomi folded her arms across her chest and looked straight ahead. Her expression was unreadable. Rebecca bristled. Sophie smirked uneasily, and the passengers whispered theories into the glow of their phones. Slowly, the weight of the room shifted. This was no longer about a seat in first class. It was about the question every voice in the cabin was now whispering. Who exactly was Naomi Ellis Carter? The cabin's air was no longer calm. It had thickened into something taut and fragile. Every word, every gesture seemed amplified, as though the plane itself had become an auditorium. Naomi Ellis Carter remained in 1A, her posture unwavering, while the flight attendants stood over her like guards before a locked door. Rebecca Miles tried again, her tone strained with the tension of someone who felt control slipping. "Ma'am, this will be your final warning. Move to coach now." Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her boarding pass, placed it squarely on the tray table, and slid it toward Rebecca with deliberate precision. Scan it again. In front of everyone. Rebecca hesitated, phones tilted higher. A few passengers murmured agreement, subtle, cautious, but unmistakable. "Why not just scan it again?" a voice whispered from the back. "What are they afraid of?" Rebecca's jaw tightened. Her fingers tapped the tablet once more, but the result on her screen stayed stubborn. Economy. She straightened quickly, as though speed could mask the doubt in her face. "The system confirms it. You are not assigned this seat." Naomi studied her for a long, steady moment. Then, without a word, she reached into her satchel again. This time, she pulled out a thick envelope. Its paper edges were worn, faintly creased, as if carried often but rarely shown. She set it on the tray, opened the flap, and drew out the folded sheets inside. The rustle of paper drew the entire cabin's attention. Passengers craned their necks. The glow of recording phones hovered closer. Naomi unfolded the first document and laid it flat. It was her booking confirmation, printed in crisp ink. The line was clear: Seat 1A, first class, paid 3 weeks in advance. She placed it beside the boarding pass, as if setting down a piece of evidence. Rebecca's nostrils flared. "Anyone can print those," she said sharply. "This doesn't prove Naomi cut her off." Her voice calm, but edged with something sharp enough to draw blood. "It proves more than your word does right now." A ripple moved through the cabin, murmurs like wind over grass. Sophie Grant stepped forward, her youthful confidence radiating as though she could shield Rebecca from embarrassment. "Ma'am," she said, her smirk faint but visible, "I've seen this before. People try to fake confirmations all the time. It's not going to work." Naomi's eyes flicked to her, cool and unimpressed. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she reached for the second sheet. She unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and the weight of the paper itself seemed to silence the room. It wasn't just another booking confirmation. It was her frequent flyer statement, the top corner stamped with the words, "Diamond Elite Lifetime Status." The numbers spoke for themselves: 22 years of loyalty, hundreds of flights, millions of miles. She placed it down beside the first document, then leaned back slightly in her seat. Her voice was even, almost soft, but the clarity made every word feel carved in stone. "You said anyone can fake a card, anyone can print paper. But the numbers, the history, that is mine. and it is not for you to dismiss." Sophie's smirk faltered, but she pressed on, her pride unwilling to bend. These programs are easy to manipulate. People enough. Naomi's voice cut clean, sharper than it had been all evening. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The authority in her tone silenced Sophie mid-sentence. The cabin held its breath. Even Rebecca shifted slightly, her resolve thinning under the weight of Naomi's refusal. From 2A, Mark Stevens muttered again, but this time his voice lacked confidence. "I mean, she has the papers." Angela Brooks leaned forward from row 3, her son asleep against her shoulder now. Her voice was low, but it carried conviction. "She showed you proof. Why won't you just acknowledge it?" Rebecca's cheeks flushed crimson. "Because it doesn't matter what she shows. The system is what we follow. And the system says economy." The words hung in the air like smoke. Passengers exchanged glances, whispers darting back and forth. "So it's not about the ticket. Then what's it about? They just don't want her here." Naomi's fingers rested lightly on the papers before her. She could feel the eyes, the weight of judgment pressing against her skin. Inside, a storm of frustration pulsed. She wanted to shout, to slam the documents into Rebecca's hands, to demand the respect she was owed. But she didn't. She had lived long enough to know that anger only confirmed what others wanted to believe about her. So she breathed, once, twice, steadying the fire inside until it became a controlled flame. Her thoughts turned inward. If I leave this seat, I lose more than comfort. I lose the principle. I prove them right that my presence here is negotiable, conditional, and if I stay, I hold the line for more than myself. The silence stretched until it felt unbreakable. Then Naomi lifted her chin and spoke again. "The system is only as honest as the people who run it. Right now, your system is lying." A gasp slipped from somewhere behind her. The words were simple, but they hit with the weight of truth. Rebecca faltered, just for a moment, her authority cracking. Sophie shifted uncomfortably, no longer so smug. Naomi gathered the papers into a neat stack, aligned the corners, and set them squarely in front of her, visible to every camera recording. Then she folded her hands over them, her expression calm, almost serene. The cabin was silent again, but it was a different silence now, not one of judgment, but of suspense. And Naomi knew the tide was shifting. This was no longer just about whether she could sit in seat 1A. It was about whether the system could withstand the truth she carried in her hands. The cabin had grown so quiet that every small sound felt amplified. The faint hiss of the air vents, the click of an overhead bin shutting, the soft scrape of a glass being set down. It was as though the entire plane was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Naomi Ellis Carter sat in 1A, her documents and boarding pass still arranged in neat order on the tray table. Her posture was composed, her hands folded, her gaze fixed forward. On the surface, she was stillness itself. But inside, a storm brewed, silent but ferocious. She could feel her pulse pressing against her temples, the steady rhythm of frustration demanding release. Every fiber of her body wanted to stand, to confront, to unleash the words that burned on her tongue. She had endured this tone, this dismissal, this subtle blade of exclusion too many times in her life. To be told she didn't belong, even when she had earned her place 100 times over, but she had also learned the cost of letting anger lead. The moment her voice rose, the moment her temper slipped, the narrative would change. No longer a customer defending her right, but a disruptive passenger. Not a woman asserting dignity, but a stereotype confirmed. So she chose silence, a deliberate, sharpened silence. Her thoughts spiraled inward. They want me to react. They want me to make it easy to dismiss me. But I will not give them that satisfaction. I will not be their excuse. I will be the mirror they cannot look away from. She reached once more for her leather-bound notebook, its cover soft from years of use. She opened it and began to write in a steady hand. The names of the attendants, the times of their warnings, the exact words they had spoken. She recorded it all with the precision of a court reporter. Passengers whispered louder now. No longer just judgment, but curiosity. She's writing everything down. Is she building a case? Why does she look so calm? Sophie Grant, the younger attendant, scoffed openly. What? Are you planning to sue us? This is ridiculous. Naomi didn't lift her eyes. Her pen moved smoothly across the page. Each stroke was deliberate, each word carved into permanence. She wasn't just documenting for herself. She was letting everyone see that she was building a record. Angela Brooks leaned closer, whispering to the woman across the aisle. That's not someone bluffing. That's someone who knows exactly what she's doing. Mark Stevens shifted uncomfortably in 2A. Only minutes ago, he had dismissed Naomi with a laugh, but now he found himself studying her with unease. The certainty in her silence unsettled him more than any raised voice could have. Rebecca Miles bristled. Authority was supposed to be hers, reinforced by uniform and procedure. But somehow, in this moment, she felt exposed. She crossed her arms, her voice loud enough to fill the cabin. "Ma'am, your refusal is unacceptable. We are escalating this. Security will arrive shortly." Naomi finally set down her pen. She closed the notebook with a soft snap and returned it to her satchel. Then she folded her hands once more, her expression unreadable. Her phone buzzed again. This time she allowed herself a glance, angling it low, shielding it from the surrounding eyes. The message was blunt, urgent. Emergency session begins now. Her stomach tightened. She had tried to separate the two worlds, the boardroom and the boarding gate, but the collision was inevitable now. She exhaled slowly and slipped the phone face down, making no visible reaction. But Lila Torres in 3B saw the flicker of the screen. She leaned closer to her phone, whispering to her live stream audience. "Okay, did you guys catch that another alert? Something about a session. She's important. I'm telling you, this isn't just a random passenger." The comments rolled in. "She's corporate. She's a lawyer. This feels bigger than a seat." Naomi's gaze drifted to the window once more. The tarmac lights glowed against the night. She remembered the countless times she had sat in boardrooms with men who doubted her, clients who underestimated her, competitors who smirked until they lost. She had survived all of it not by shouting, but by standing firm, by letting silence force others to hear what they didn't want to face. Inside, her thoughts wrestled. Do I reveal myself now? Do I show them who I am? Or do I wait every second I sit here? The story builds on its own. But every second also costs me control. Her jaw tightened. She chose patience. Rebecca's radio crackled faintly. Naomi caught the words only in fragments. Security. On the way. Escort. Rebecca exhaled in relief, her stance regaining some of its confidence. "They'll be here shortly," she announced, her tone carrying triumph. Passengers shifted again, murmuring, speculating. Phones tilted upward, capturing not just Naomi but the attendants, the unfolding drama, the anticipation of conflict. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, letting the hum of the engine soothe her. She steadied her breath, her chest rising and falling in controlled rhythm. On the outside, she was still a stone. On the inside, the storm raged louder. She remembered her grandmother's voice, words spoken decades ago. Never let them mistake your silence for weakness. Let it be the weight that makes them stumble. Her eyes opened again, sharper now. She looked at Rebecca, at Sophie, at the passengers watching her like a spectacle. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Because silence, in that moment, was no longer absence. It was pressure, it was resistance, it was defiance carved into air. And as the seconds ticked by, as the weight of that silence grew unbearable, the passengers began to realize something that unsettled them even more than the attendants' hostility. Naomi Ellis Carter was not waiting to be saved. She was waiting for them to reveal themselves. The storm was already here. It just didn't make noise. The silence was broken by the heavy thud of footsteps coming down the jet bridge. They were slow, measured, the kind of steps that carried authority before a word was spoken. A ripple of murmurs ran through the first-class cabin. Passengers adjusted in their seats, phones tilted higher, and eyes locked on the aisle like it was a stage about to reveal its next act. Two men appeared at the front of the cabin. The first was tall, broad-shouldered, with gray streaking his hair at the temples. His uniform bore the polished look of years of service. This was Officer Grant, the older of the pair, moving with the calm gravity of someone who had seen countless confrontations but never rushed them. Behind him was Officer Diaz, younger, lean, his dark eyes darting nervously between the passengers' raised phones and the attendants who stood stiffly as though reinforcements had finally arrived. Rebecca straightened instantly, relief sweeping across her face. Authority had returned to her side. "Officers!" she said quickly, her voice loud and sharp. "This passenger is refusing to comply with seating instructions. She needs to be escorted to her correct seat in economy." The words landed like a verdict she thought already decided. Naomi Ellis Carter remained still. Her boarding pass, her loyalty card, her printed confirmation, they all lay in perfect order on the tray table. Her notebook rested in her satchel now, but the memory of her steady pen strokes lingered in the minds of those who had watched. She folded her hands together and lifted her gaze to meet Officer Grant's. The older man studied her for a moment before speaking. His tone was polite, almost gentle, but carried the authority of protocol. "Ma'am, we need you to step off the aircraft for a moment so we can sort this out." Rebecca exhaled as though victory was finally in her grasp. Sophie smirked, her arms folded like a spectator watching a play reach its predictable ending. A few passengers nodded, murmuring relief that the delay would end soon. But others leaned forward, phones angled, eyes sharp with anticipation. They weren't sure this scene was over. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "You want me to leave my paid seat so you can sort it out?" Officer Diaz jumped in quickly, eager to defuse tension. "It's just procedure, ma'am. It'll only take a minute." Naomi could feel the cameras capturing every angle, every word. She imagined the live stream captions already scrolling "Security arrives. Passenger refuses to move." First-class drama continues, but she also felt something else, the quiet shift of passengers' loyalties. They weren't just watching her anymore, they were questioning the system that demanded she move. She took a slow breath, her thoughts steadying. If I walk out, they win by default. If I stay, I force the truth to surface in front of everyone, which will cost them more. She looked at Officer Grant again. His face was unreadable, professional, but there was something in his eyes, curiosity, maybe even doubt. She decided to hold that thread. Naomi rose slowly, gathering her satchel with deliberate care. Her movements carried no panic, no surrender, only precision. The officers flanked her, one on each side, and together they walked down the aisle. Phones followed them like spotlights, passengers leaning back in their seats to capture every second. The jet bridge was cooler, the hum of the cabin replaced by the sterile silence of the terminal air. Naomi paused just beyond the aircraft door, the officers stopping with her. Rebecca and Sophie followed close behind, their relief now painted as smug confidence. At the gate desk, A woman in a navy blazer was already waiting. She carried a tablet tucked against her arm, her lips pressed thin with impatience. This was Janet Howard, the gate supervisor, her expression one of irritation mixed with caution. "What's going on here?" Janet demanded. Rebecca leapt in, eager to solidify her authority. "This passenger is refusing to move to her assigned coach seat. We verified she doesn't belong in first class." Janet turned her eyes on Naomi. Naomi handed over her boarding pass without a word. Her face remained composed, her silence heavier than accusation. Janet studied the pass, then glanced at the ID Naomi offered, her brows furrowed briefly before she masked it. She tapped the tablet. "System shows economy." Naomi's voice was measured, almost judicial. "The system shows what it is told to show. Facts are facts. Seat 1A was paid 3 weeks ago. Diamond Elite status. Lifetime loyalty." Officer Grant shifted slightly, addressing Janet. "Ma'am, I checked the documents. They match. Boarding pass, ID, everything lines up." Rebecca's face flushed. She's manipulating the system somehow. The phrase landed like a blade. Manipulating the system. Spoken with the same certainty as doesn't belong. Behind the counter, a passenger who had followed to the gate let out a sharp breath. Phones raised higher, catching every word. Whispered comments raced through the crowd forming at the gate. Manipulating, or just existing. Why are they so desperate to get her out of first class? Naomi did not respond immediately. She let the silence settle, let the weight of the accusation hang in the air until its ugliness became undeniable. Then she reached calmly into her satchel. She scrolled briefly through her phone, pressed a contact, and lifted it to her ear. "Yes, it's me," she said, her tone calm, professional. "I'm running late. No, do not wait. Begin the emergency session in boardroom A. I'll join remotely." The call lasted less than a minute. She ended it with no visible reaction, but her eyes lifted just enough to meet Janet's. A murmur rippled through the gate crowd. A woman whispered, "Did she just say boardroom emergency session?" Rebecca's confidence cracked. Sophie glanced nervously at Janet, unsure whether to smirk or retreat. Janet cleared her throat, trying to regain authority. "Look, Miss Carter, is it you can either sit in economy or take another flight? Those are your choices." Naomi's hand slipped into her satchel once more. This time, she drew out a slim leather card case. From it, she removed a single business card, its edges embossed with gold lettering. She placed it into Janet's palm. Janet glanced down. The color drained from her face. The card read, "Naomi Ellis Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Carter Global Ventures." A wave of whispers spread instantly through the crowd. Phone zoomed in, capturing the embossed letters. A man near the back gasped. "Carter Global, that's massive." Another checked his phone, his eyes widening. They own dozens of companies, billions in revenue. Janet's lips parted, but no words came. Rebecca's breath caught. Sophie's smirk dissolved completely. Naomi's voice was even, unshaken. "Now you understand why I document everything. Why I don't raise my voice. Because when you assume I don't belong, you don't just insult me. You insult the seat I paid for, the miles I flew, the years I supported this airline. And worse, you insult the principle that anyone who looks like me can sit in this cabin without suspicion." The gate area froze. The silence no longer oppressive, but electric. Passengers who had doubted now stared wide-eyed. Phones streamed, comments flooding faster than fingers could type. Naomi Ellis Carter stood calm, her satchel still clasped at her side, her voice steady as stone. And in that moment, the story changed. She was no longer just a passenger refusing to move. She was a force the system had underestimated. The gate area was no longer just a waiting space. It had turned into a stage, and Naomi Ellis Carter stood at its center. Cameras framed her from every angle. Passengers who had disembarked lingered near the glass walls, their phones raised like torches in a modern coliseum. Security officers stood on either side of her, caught between duty and the unsettling realization that this was no ordinary passenger. Janet Howard still held Naomi's business card in her palm, her knuckles whitening. She glanced at Rebecca, then Sophie, but neither attendant offered support. Both looked shaken, their confidence unraveling thread by thread. Naomi clasped her hands gently in front of her, her satchel at her side. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the gate with clarity that made it impossible to dismiss. I told you before, this is not about raising my voice. This is about facts, about proof, about the choices you made when you assumed I didn't belong. Her gaze swept the crowd. She could feel the eyes, the whispers, the disbelief bending into something else recognition. Officer Grant, the older guard, cleared his throat. His tone was respectful, almost cautious. Ma'am, I've seen people bluff before, but you're not bluffing. Are you? Naomi's lips curved faintly. Not a smile, but something steadier, sharper. Do I look like I bluff? The murmurs rose. Lila Torres, phone still streaming from 3B, whispered directly into her mic. Okay, guys, she's the CEO of Carter Global Ventures. This is insane. She's not just a passenger. She's someone big, like really big. Her feed exploded with comments. I knew it. No wonder she was so calm. This airline is about to regret everything. Naomi reached into her satchel again, withdrawing a leather portfolio. The edges were scuffed, the kind of wear that came from years of carrying documents too important to leave behind. She placed it on the counter, opened it slowly, and slid a sheet free. The paper gleamed under the fluorescent lights, stamped with seals and signatures. She lifted it just high enough for nearby cameras to catch. Her voice was steady, deliberate. 6 months ago, Carter Global Ventures acquired a 21% stake in this airline, second largest shareholder, larger than any single executive on the board. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man muttered under his breath, "She owns part of the airline." Another voice whispered sharply, "Oh my God!" Rebecca stumbled back half a step, her throat dry. Sophie's lips parted, but no words emerged. Janet looked as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Naomi placed the paper flat against the counter, pressing it gently with her fingertips. I did not want to disclose this here. I wanted to be just another passenger on just another flight. But your actions forced me into this moment. You chose not to see me. So now, everyone will see the truth. Phones tilted closer, capturing every word. Some passengers whispered with awe. Others typed furiously into livestream chats that were now scrolling faster than eyes could follow. Officer Diaz, the younger security guard, blinked rapidly. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke. So, you don't just fly with them, you help keep them in the sky. Naomi looked at him, her gaze unwavering. Exactly. The realization rippled through the gate. A mother clutched her daughter's hand tightly, whispering, "Remember this moment." A college-aged man whispered to his friend, "She's rewriting the rules in front of us." Naomi gathered the papers again, sliding them carefully back into the folder. Then she lifted her eyes once more, her expression calm but edged with steel. This is not about me reclaiming a seat. This is about accountability. When you dismissed me, you dismissed your own credibility. You exposed the fragility of a system that crumbles under the weight of prejudice. Rebecca finally found her voice. We can reseat you now. Miss Carter, that's not a problem. Naomi shook her head slightly, her tone final. This isn't about reseating me. It's about resetting you." The words landed like a gavel. The crowd stirred, their murmurs swelling into a low wave of agreement. Some clapped softly, others raised their phones higher, capturing the exact moment the balance of power shifted. Janet's radio crackled urgently at her hip. A voice from headquarters buzzed through Supervisor Howard. "Hold all action. Priority 1 call incoming." Her face drained of color. She didn't announce what she'd heard, but the passengers noticed her silence, noticed her trembling hand clutching the radio. Naomi adjusted her cardigan, every movement deliberate, composed. She checked her watch, then looked at Janet. Right on time. The gate was electric now. The murmurs had transformed into open awe. Naomi Ellis Carter was no longer a question mark. She was an answer too heavy to ignore. Rebecca and Sophie stood frozen, their uniforms suddenly flimsy in the glow of cameras. Janet's authority had evaporated, her shoulders slumped with the weight of a realization she hadn't prepared for. Officer Grant and Officer Diaz remained close, but their postures had shifted. They no longer looked like men sent to remove a problem. They looked like men guarding someone important. Naomi picked up her portfolio, slid it neatly back into her satchel, and turned her gaze toward the passengers who had watched every second. "You wanted to know who I am. Now you do. And you understand why silence was my weapon, because silence reveals truth faster than shouting ever could." Applause broke out from somewhere near the back. It was tentative at first, then grew, row by row, until the entire gate area echoed with clapping. Phones shook as they recorded, live stream feeds filling with comments. She just flipped the script. This is history unfolding. She's not just flying, she's flying the system itself. Naomi didn't bow to the applause. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, her presence calm, centered, unshaken. The storm she had carried in silence was now in full view, its force undeniable. And as the crowd leaned in closer, as the airline staff shrank back, as the live feed streamed out to thousands watching beyond the airport walls, one truth was certain. Naomi Ellis Carter had revealed herself, and the system that tried to dismiss her would never look the same. The gate area no longer felt like an airport terminal. It felt like a tribunal. Rows of passengers sat or stood with phones lifted, some streaming live to thousands, others silently recording, their screens reflecting Naomi Ellis Carter's calm face. Janet Howard stood rigid behind the counter, clutching her radio like a lifeline. Rebecca and Sophie flanked her, uniforms still crisp, but authority fraying like thread pulled loose. Officers Grant and Diaz lingered nearby, their posture signaling something between respect and surrender. Naomi rested her satchel on the counter, her papers tucked back inside, but her presence still commanding. The applause from moments ago had faded, but its echo lingered in the air, replaced by a tense, reverent silence. She spoke softly, her voice deliberate, each word carrying weight. "When you treat a paying customer like a trespasser, you reveal more than bias. You reveal fragility." The sentence hit harder than any raised voice could. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A man in a business suit muttered, "She sounds like a judge delivering a verdict." Naomi straightened her cardigan sleeve and looked at Janet. "You asked me to leave my seat. Now I ask you to consider the cost of that mistake. Because starting now, I am not the one on trial. Your system is—" Phones tilted higher, the murmurs swelled. The passengers weren't just bystanders anymore, they were witnesses. Janet's radio buzzed again, insistent. A voice crackled through Supervisor Howard. "Do not proceed until you receive further instruction. Headquarters is monitoring." Her face tightened, but she didn't repeat the order. She couldn't. Every eye was already on her, waiting for her to admit what had been said. Naomi leaned gently on the counter, her hands folded. She let the silence stretch, let the discomfort settle into the air until it grew unbearable. Then she extended her hand. Scan my pass again. Here, in front of everyone. Janet hesitated, her throat tightening. Go on, Naomi pressed, her tone calm but edged with quiet authority. Let the truth show itself. Phones leaned closer, screens capturing the moment. Janet finally swiped the pass against her tablet. The device flickered, loading slowly, every second stretched into eternity. Then the words appeared, clear and undeniable. Seat 1A verified. Diamond Elite. Gasps spread through the crowd. A woman whispered, "It was there all along." Another shook her head, muttering, "They just didn't want to see it." Naomi's voice sharpened only slightly. "So the system recognizes my seat, but the staff chose not to." The attendants stiffened, their composure unraveling under the weight of evidence. Rebecca looked down, her lips pressed tight. Sophie's arms folded defensively across her chest, but her smirk was gone. Naomi turned toward the passengers. "You've all witnessed this. I did not come here to argue. I came here to travel. But since they forced me out of my seat, I will make sure every passenger here understands what is at stake." She adjusted the strap of her satchel, her voice growing firmer. "Procedures, policies, reputations, these are not abstract. They are lived, and today you've seen exactly how fragile they become when tested by something as simple as my appearance." The crowd murmured, their whispers no longer skeptical, but supportive. Angela Brooks, still holding her son's hand, spoke aloud. "She's right. If they can treat her this way, what about the rest of us?" The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Naomi glanced at Officer Grant. "You reviewed my boarding pass. You checked my ID. Do they match?" Grant nodded once, firmly. "Yes, ma'am. Everything checks out." Naomi turned back to Janet. "And yet, I was removed from my seat, humiliated in front of this cabin. Tell me, Supervisor Howard, is that what you call procedure, or is it something else entirely?" Janet's lips parted, but no words came. Her radio buzzed again, a frantic voice urging action, but she pressed it to her side, trembling. Naomi took a step back, folding her arms lightly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't pleading. She was resolute, her presence radiating control. "This is bigger than one flight," she said, her gaze sweeping the passengers. "This is about a system that thought it could humiliate me without consequence. And starting today, your authority ends where mine begins." A hush fell. Then, from somewhere near the back, applause broke out again. It spread quickly, growing louder, echoing through the gate until it filled the terminal. Phones shook in hands, their feeds exploding with comments. She just flipped the trial on them. History in real time. She's holding court in the airport. Rebecca's face was pale. Sophie whispered something sharp under her breath, but no one paid attention. All eyes were locked on Naomi. She didn't bow to the applause. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, then lowered herself into a nearby chair, serene and steady, her satchel resting across her knees. And in that stillness, the truth was undeniable. The gate had transformed, no longer a place of boarding and departure. It was now a courtroom, and Naomi Ellis Carter had just claimed the judge's seat. The gate had become a theater of consequence. The applause faded, but the energy it left behind still pulsed through the air like static. Every face in the crowd seemed sharper now, eyes wide with realization that they were witnessing more than a travel dispute. They were watching a system buckle. Naomi Ellis Carter remained seated, her satchel across her knees, her gaze steady. She had not raised her voice once, yet the power in her silence had carried further than shouts ever could. Janet Howard tried to regain composure. She pressed the radio to her ear, muttering into it as though the connection to headquarters might salvage control. Her voice shook despite her attempt at authority. Yes. Yes. I understand. We're holding position. She's still here. Rebecca Miles stood to the side, arms folded tightly, her face pale. Sophie Grant fidgeted beside her. Her youthful defiance cracked into uncertainty. Neither spoke. Neither dared. Naomi finally broke the silence, her tone measured. The humiliation you tried to bury has already spread beyond this gate. Every camera here is a witness, every feed is a record, and every second you hesitate, the consequences multiply. Her words hit with precision, like stones placed carefully into still water. Ripples spread immediately, passengers whispering, phones buzzing with push notifications, live comments flashing faster. In row 3, Lila Torres lowered her phone just long enough to whisper to the woman beside her, "It's trending. Thousands of people are watching this right now. News sites are picking it up." The woman's eyes widened before the plane even takes off. "Yes," Lila whispered, "before takeoff." Officer Grant shifted his weight, his posture respectful but cautious. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "what exactly are you planning?" Naomi's eyes moved to him, calm but direct, not a disruption, a correction. Her phone buzzed in her satchel. This time, she didn't ignore it. She lifted it, unlocked the screen, and angled it so that those nearest could see. The subject line of the email notification glowed in bold letters, Atlantic Airways, shareholder, alert incident in progress. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Even Janet, clutching her radio, faltered. That's impossible. Those alerts don't go public unless a shareholder with authority triggers them. Naomi finished smoothly, locking her phone again. "Which I did." The murmurs sharpened into disbelief. A businessman near the window typed furiously on his laptop, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "It's true. Stocks are dipping. 2% drop in the last 15 minutes. Phones pinged around the gate, passengers receiving their own notifications. Some held their screens high, flashing the headlines to the crowd-breaking airline faces shareholder confrontation at airport. Rebecca stumbled back another step, as though the weight of the news had physically struck her. Sophie pressed her hands to her temples, whispering, "Dear God, what did we do?" Naomi didn't rise. She didn't need to. From her chair, she spoke with a calm certainty that carried through the entire terminal. This is what happens when a system mistakes dignity for disruption, when procedure becomes a mask for prejudice. You thought this was about a seat. It was never about a seat. It was about power. And today, power has shifted. Applause broke out again, louder, fiercer than before. It wasn't tentative now. It was conviction. Passengers clapped, some cheering outright, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. Phones shook as they recorded, live feeds scrolling with fire emojis, exclamations, demands for accountability. Officer Diaz leaned toward Officer Grant, whispering too loudly to go unheard. "She's running the show now. This isn't our call anymore." Grant gave a small nod, his expression unreadable but respectful. It never was. Naomi waited for the applause to settle. Then she lifted her satchel, unzipped it slowly, and withdrew another document. She laid it flat on the counter, her hand pressing it so the cameras could see. "This," she said, "is not just proof of ownership. It is a governance clause. Section 14.2. Any material incident of discrimination against passengers activates immediate shareholder oversight." Janet's face blanched. "No. That clause is internal. It's not meant." Naomi's gaze pinned her. "It's meant for exactly this. Your mistake activated it, and I am here to enforce it." The crowd gasped again. A woman clapped a hand over her mouth. A man whispered into his phone, "She's quoting bylaws. She knows the rule book better than they do." Rebecca's lips trembled. Sophie whispered desperately, "What does that mean for us?" Naomi's voice was steady, each word deliberate. "It means from this moment forward, this is no longer your decision. It is mine." For a second, the silence was total, absolute. Then applause thundered through the gate once more, louder than ever, passengers rising to their feet as though in recognition of history unfolding before them. Naomi Ellis Carter didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply folded her arms across her chest, calm as ever, her presence radiating control. The consequences had already begun, and they were only getting started. The terminal was trembling with noise clapping, gasps, the relentless buzz of notifications streaming in from outside. Naomi Ellis Carter had turned the gate into a pulpit, the passengers into witnesses, and the airline staff into defendants without uttering a single unnecessary word. Janet Howard's radio kept buzzing, her hand frozen on it. Each insistent crackle from headquarters sounded more frantic, as though even the executives had lost their grip. She pressed the button once, her voice low. "Yes, yes, she's still here. The passengers are watching." Then she let it drop again, her shoulders slumping. Naomi lifted her satchel onto the counter, unzipped it with deliberate calm, and pulled out another set of papers. The cameras followed her every move. She held one sheet just long enough for the closest phones to capture its header, shareholder directive. Her voice was precise, cutting through the swell of murmurs. "Effective immediately. Personnel responsible for discriminatory conduct will be relieved of duty, pending review." The gasp was almost physical. Passengers leaned back as if struck by wind. Rebecca's mouth dropped open. Sophie let out a strangled whisper. She can't do that." Naomi's gaze cut to her, calm and sharp. "Watch me." Janet's radio came alive again, this time with a clear directive from headquarters Supervisor Howard. "Comply with shareholder instruction." "Do you understand?" Janet swallowed hard, pressing the radio close to her mouth. Her voice cracked as she answered. "Understood." The murmurs became a wave. Someone whispered, "She just fired them in real time." Another typed furiously, live stream captions flashing, "Justice faster than excuses." Rebecca's face drained of color. Sophie clutched her arm, whispering in disbelief, "What did we do?" Rebecca Naomi set the directive down and pulled out another page. "Within 48 hours, bias recognition training will be deployed to every frontline employee. No delays, no excuses. Compliance tracked and published." A businessman in the crowd muttered in awe. "She's rebuilding the airline from the gate." The passengers erupted in clapping again, louder this time, some standing, others cheering. Phones shook as they streamed, comment feeds exploding. This is history. She's rewriting policy live. This airline will never be the same. Naomi didn't wait for the applause to settle. She drew out a third sheet. Within 72 hours, a third-party anonymous reporting system will go live. Every passenger, every employee will have the right to document mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Reviewed by independent auditors, not buried, not erased. Officer Diaz stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you're not making suggestions. Are you?" Naomi met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "I don't make suggestions. I make systems." The applause grew to a roar. It filled the terminal, bouncing off the glass walls, spilling into the corridors beyond. Even passengers from neighboring gates drifted over, drawn by the spectacle. Some sat cross-legged on the floor, others pressed against the windows, their phones raised like lighthouses. Janet's face was flushed crimson. Her authority had crumbled, piece by piece, until nothing remained but compliance. She muttered into her radio again, but everyone knew what the response would be. Headquarters wasn't leading anymore. Naomi was. Naomi folded the documents neatly, slid them back into her satchel, and adjusted the strap across her shoulder. Her voice softened, but the weight of it carried through the entire space. This isn't about punishing individuals. It's about transforming culture. Today it starts here. Tomorrow it extends to every gate, every flight, every cabin. The crowd leaned in, rapt. Phones angled closer. The feed scrolled. She's setting precedent. She's holding them accountable. This is bigger than one flight. Angela Brooks stepped forward, her young son clutching her hand. Her voice trembled, but her words rang clear. Thank you. Thank you for standing your ground. For all of us. Naomi inclined her head, her eyes kind for the first time since the ordeal began. Dignity doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone, but it only survives if we refuse to move when it's threatened. Applause thundered again, echoing with emotion, this time less spectacle, more gratitude. Rebecca and Sophie stood silent, their uniforms now like costumes stripped of meaning. Janet shuffled papers at the counter, her hands shaking as though trying to occupy them. Officers Grant and Diaz stood respectfully near Naomi. No longer enforcers, but protectors of the order she had just imposed. Naomi looked out across the sea of phones and faces. You've witnessed the humiliation. Now you witness the correction. Remember this moment. From now on, accountability isn't optional. It is the system. The cheers rose once more, echoing so loudly that even the boarding announcements for other flights were drowned out. Naomi remained still in the middle of it, calm and centered, her expression unreadable. It was no longer about her seat. It was no longer about first class. This was the reset of an airline, unfolding in real time. By nightfall, the glass-walled conference room at Atlantic Airways headquarters glowed like a lantern above the city. Screens lined the walls, each broadcasting the same thin clips of the confrontation at Gate 14, Naomi Ellis Carter's calm defiance. The eruption of applause, the directives spoken with surgical precision. News anchors dissected every frame while stock tickers scrolled crimson at the bottom of the broadcasts. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Executives, lawyers, and directors filled every seat around the long mahogany table. Their voices were hushed, their postures rigid, as if even shifting in their chairs might expose weakness. At the head of the table sat Patricia Vaughn, the CEO of Atlantic Airways. Her jaw was tight, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion and fury. She slammed a report onto the table, the sound echoing in the silence. "We don't have days," she snapped. "We have hours." She's invoked Section 14, and shareholder oversight is in effect. Do you understand what that means? The general counsel leaned forward, his tie slightly askew. It means Naomi Carter has full authority to issue directives in response to what qualifies as a material incident of discrimination. And she's already issued 3. Training, anonymous reporting, suspensions. A murmur spread through the room. One director raised her hand, her voice trembling. If we resist, she could force a governance review. That could topple this board. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of truth. Finally, Patricia exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of her nose. Then we don't resist. We execute. The words felt like surrender, and yet no one challenged them. At that moment, the largest screen at the end of the room flickered. Naomi Ellis Carter appeared by video link, her face lit by the soft glow of her home office. She had changed from her cardigan into a simple navy blazer, her presence calm, her eyes sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone steady, "this is not a negotiation. This is an emergency reform session." The board shifted uncomfortably. A few directors glanced at Patricia, but she remained still. Her lips pressed thin. Naomi continued, "Every hour you hesitate costs you passengers, revenue, credibility. The world is watching, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now." One vice president tried to speak, his voice defensive. "Miss Carter, with respect, logistics for system-wide training will take weeks." Naomi's gaze cut through him. Her voice didn't rise, but it grew colder, sharper. "When weather grounds half your fleet, you reroute thousands of passengers in hours. Don't tell me logistics take weeks. Tell me you lack will." The man's words faltered. He looked down, ashamed. The room fell silent again, all eyes fixed on Naomi's steady image on the screen. She laid out the mandates like stepping stones across a river. Bias recognition training must launch within 30 days. The anonymous reporting platform must be live in 72 hours. Independent auditors must be contracted by the end of the week. Compliance reports will be public. One director whispered to another, "This is brutal." Another corrected softly, "This is survival." Patricia leaned forward finally, her voice low but steady. "Miss Carter, the board accepts your conditions." Naomi nodded slightly, her composure unbroken. "Understand this tonight is not about saving your image. Tonight is about earning back the right to exist in the skies you profit from. The humiliation I endured was not personal. It was systemic, and it will end on your watch or under your replacements." No one argued. The words landed like weights, pressing the room into silence. Lawyers scribbled furiously, drafting compliance frameworks. Communication officers typed out emergency statements. Directors sat rigid, the reality sinking into their bones. The authority they thought immutable had just been dismantled in real time. Naomi leaned closer to the camera, her eyes unyielding. Accountability is no longer optional. It is the system. The video feed cut, her image replaced by the Atlantic Airways logo. The room exhaled collectively, as though only now remembering to breathe. Patricia Vaughn sat back heavily in her chair. "God help us," she muttered, then, louder, to the room, "Begin execution. Every directive, no excuses." Around the table, heads nodded grimly. Some looked relieved, others resentful, but none resisted, because they all knew Naomi Ellis Carter had already won. By the time Naomi Ellis Carter reboarded Flight 261 Dawn was only a few hours away, the atmosphere inside the aircraft had transformed. Hours earlier, whispers and suspicion had filled the cabin like smoke. Now the air felt charged, reverent, almost ceremonial. Passengers straightened in their seats as she walked down the aisle. Some lowered their phones, not to record, but to clear space. The quiet confidence in her stride was unmistakable, the calm certainty of a woman who had shifted the ground beneath an entire industry. Seat 1A waited, the same seat where the humiliation had begun, the same seat the world had watched her defend. Naomi moved with deliberate care, her satchel in hand, her cardigan folded neatly over her arm. She eased into the leather chair, her movements graceful, her posture steady. The businessman in 2A, Mark Stevens, leaned forward. Earlier, he had muttered about it not being worth the trouble. Now his face was flushed with embarrassment. His voice was hushed but earnest. "Miss Carter, I owe you an apology. I didn't see it clearly at first. I didn't understand." Naomi looked at him, her gaze soft but unwavering. "Then, understand this. Silence is never neutral. It sides with the system that harms." Mark nodded quickly, chastened, his eyes falling to his lap. Across the aisle, a young woman whispered, "She's sitting in the same seat, like nothing ever happened." Another replied quietly, "No." Like everything changed. The new flight crew, hastily assigned from the terminal, stood at their stations. Their uniforms were immaculate, their smiles tight but respectful. They did not approach Naomi with suspicion, nor did they treat her with fawning deference. They treated her as what she was, a passenger, equal to every other on board. And that, Naomi thought, was how it should have been from the beginning. As the plane taxied down the runway, the hum of the engines vibrated beneath her feet. Naomi fastened her seatbelt and let her eyes drift to the window. The tarmac lights streaked past. Yet her mind wasn't on the destination. It was on the work ahead, the audits, the reforms, the cultural shifts that could not be undone by press releases. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. The storm had passed, but the real flight was only beginning. The aircraft lifted into the night sky, its body tilting upward as the city lights fell away beneath. A ripple of applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling until it filled the cabin. Passengers clapped not for the takeoff, but for her. Naomi didn't stand. She didn't wave. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging not celebration, but recognition. Somewhere over the clouds, the plane leveled. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, her hand resting on the satchel in her lap. She thought of her grandmother's words, the ones she had carried like a compass through decades of battles. Never let them mistake your silence for weakness. Let it be the weight that makes them stumble. She smiled faintly, just for herself. The flight was quiet now, a calm after storm. Yet beneath that calm, something permanent had shifted. Every passenger knew it. The business traveler who had doubted her, the mother who had defended her, the student who had streamed the truth to thousands, all of them had carried away more than a boarding pass and a flight number. They had carried a lesson in dignity. Hours later, soft light spilled across the horizon. The cabin windows glowed gold with sunrise. Flight 261 descended smoothly, wheels touching down as the sky brightened. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but heavier than routine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. On behalf of Atlantic Airways, thank you for flying with us. His tone carried more weight than the script required, as though he too understood this was no ordinary arrival. Applause rose once more, quieter this time, but laced with emotion. Some clapped with gratitude, others with awe. A few simply sat in silence, reflecting on what they had witnessed. As the plane rolled to the gate, phones buzzed with notifications. News alerts flashed across screens: CEO confrontation forces, airline overhaul. Headlines spread like wildfire. Passengers exchanged whispers, marveling at how quickly the outside world had caught the story they had lived inside. The aisle filled slowly as passengers stood. Some paused by 1A as they passed, offering nods, murmured thanks, or quiet handshakes. Angela Brooks stopped with her teenage daughter. Her voice trembled as she spoke. She'll never forget this. Naomi met the girl's eyes with a steady kindness. Then, make sure she never accepts less. The girl nodded, her grip tightening around her mother's hand. When the cabin cleared, Naomi rose. She smoothed her cardigan, adjusted the strap of her satchel, and stood for the final time. She paused at the threshold of the jet bridge, the morning light spilling through the open door. Beyond the glass, reporters had already gathered, cameras glinting, flashes cutting through the dawn. Security held the press back, but the frenzy was visible. Naomi turned once more to look at the cabin, the rows where strangers had become witnesses, the aisle where silence had become resistance, the seat where humiliation had been transformed into history. Her voice was low, but clear enough for the nearest passengers to hear. Remember this flight, not because of me, but because you saw what happens when dignity refuses to move. Then she stepped forward, unhurried, into the morning light. Behind her, Flight 261 had landed, but in front of her, something larger had taken flight, a legacy airborne. What happened to Naomi Ellis Carter was never about a seat in first class. It was about a system that mistook prejudice for procedure, that turned dignity into a debate. And in the span of a single flight, she proved something powerful, that silence can be sharper than shouting, and that one woman's refusal to move can shift the ground beneath an entire industry. She walked onto that plane as a passenger, but she walked off as a force of accountability. She reminded everyone watching, whether in that cabin, at the gate, or on millions of screens across the world, that dignity is not negotiable. Think about the moments in your own life when you've been told you don't belong. Think about the times silence felt safer than resistance. Naomi's story is a call to all of us: do not move when your worth is questioned. Stand your ground, because you are not alone, and because the truth is stronger than the systems that try to deny it. As we close this story, let it linger not just as outrage, but as resolve. Outrage against discrimination, resolve to carry dignity forward. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own strength, then share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and join the community we're building here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss the next story of courage, justice, and transformation. Because voices like Naomi's matter, and so do ours.